Sorry, Teams is not cooperating, just super slow.
Yeah, well,
Is it just
is
me
internet
or...
working?
Huh?
Is internet working?
I don't know, looks like it works, but...
Well, because I rebooted everything, so let's make sure.
I signed in.
We're live on YouTube.
Okay, looks like we are live here too. Can you hear me? Okay, we have Roy and Mario, not counting Michelle and Chris, since they're here.
I can hear you.
Oh, good. Okay. And I'll mute it here. Okay. So you should hear me, but we will not hear you talk back. Okay, let's start. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right.
Bow our heads. Father, we thank you again for this meeting, that you're allowed to come here freely and enjoy the camaraderie. Not only that, learn something about our mission. Be with those that still may be en route. I also pray that the storm that we're going to be receiving shortly will not cause damage to people, both in the mountains with the heavy snows or in the heavy rains. We just ask your hand to give them strength and safety. In your name we pray. Amen.
Right, welcome. Hopefully last week you guys enjoyed this little celebration. So my original plan was to talk about it in the previous meeting, and we had all advance notice that the meeting will not take place, but better be late with something than not to have it at all. So today we will be supposed to have safety meeting. Do we know if Roger is coming, or
No.
you're gonna do the... Okay, sounds good. So the primary agenda is safety, and before we go into the safety details, I'd like to talk about a few general items. First of all, the aircraft 743 Charlie Papa is back in service. It's in the hangar, full mission capable. Some of the maintenance items were deferred to the next oil change in 50 hours. So for now, we have an aircraft ready to go in boarding. Chris, have you uploaded all your paperwork? Okay, okay, so go for it. Upload. If you need any help, let me know. We can maybe sit one day and tackle it over the phone or whatnot. All right. For those who is already flying, just a quick reminder: if you are flying on a funded mission, at the end of sortie debrief, we still have to submit form E108, which essentially triggers reimbursement of funds from the national headquarters to the wing. So don't forget about that, and I can quickly show how that works just to remind everyone. It's not very obvious, and I honestly don't understand why it's not automated, but there is just an extra step we have to follow. I'll share my screen. You should see on Teams my Chrome, and let's say there was a mission on 19th, and now you see this mission, these sorties are locked up. They are grayed out and locked up. That means actually the form E108 was properly submitted. So when you debrief the sortie, it goes into the gray state, meaning that it's closed, but not quite. So then you click on Wimmer's menu up in the top left corner, scroll down to Finance, I believe, Finance and Admin section, and then go to Create E108. At that point, well, you need to select the mission. So let's say I'll select 3004 just for the sake of example. I will not be submitting any forms because I don't have any pending, but then you select in the drop-down list NHQ in case if you paid with the national credit card, and it will automatically generate a report of all open sorties. So you expand air sorties, and we can see here that there is still pending sortie from February 2nd, which hasn't been processed with form E108. So if it was your sortie, you would click on it. I'm not going to do that. And then click submit. That's all it takes. So just a few extra clicks. Any questions? Okay. Once you get to do it a few times, it becomes kind of a second nature. But apparently some pilots forget to do that once in a blue moon, and the wing is not happy about that. They will chase you down, they will make you do it and make you feel embarrassed once or twice, and then you're gonna remember it. All right, so let's see what else I'd like to talk about before I hand over to safety topics. Okay, so if you already have a high performance endorsement, don't forget to upload it under your pilot credentials as we previously discussed. If you don't have one, then you just need to obtain it either through training within the Civil Air Patrol or outside, and take a photograph of it and upload under your profile in pilot qualifications. All right, a quick reminder to new members. We have 30 days from the day you join to complete level 1. Otherwise, the wing is chasing me and asking me to chase you, so you get it done. You guys are good. I have only one member delinquent on that, and I keep chasing him. Just a general reminder to everyone. From here, I'll pass it to Michelle. Michelle will present the danger of carbon monoxide poisoning. We estimate it to be relatively short presentation, and after that I'll pass it to you, Bob. Okay, Michelle? Would you like to use my? Okay, you're gonna do it. Okay, sounds good.
Hey, so, hello. I'm here to talk about carbon monoxide, which is also known as the silent killer. So, let me see if I can make this work here. Oh, thank you so much. But I'll do a nice little demonstration. There we go. So, carbon monoxide basically is a colorless, odorless, tasteless gas produced by burning gasoline, wood, propane, charcoal, or other fuels, basically everything that we use on a daily basis. Improperly ventilated appliances and engines, particularly in a tightly sealed or enclosed space, may allow carbon monoxide to accumulate to dangerous levels. Now, when too much carbon monoxide is in the air you're breathing, it enters the bloodstream and mixes with hemoglobin to form what we call in the healthcare profession as carboxyhemoglobin. It's just a fancy term for when something that shouldn't be mixed is mixed. and this prevents oxygen from reaching your tissues and organs. So basically, just to break that down, is your blood cells prefer to bond with carbon monoxide about 240 times more than they prefer to bind with oxygen. The presence of carbon monoxide in the blood displaces the oxygen, depriving the heart, the brain, and other vital organs of oxygen, thus ultimately leading to hypoxia. Carbon monoxide at high levels can kill you, hence the term silent killer. Carbon dioxide, on the other hand, occurs naturally in the atmosphere. However, since our body expels carbon dioxide, inhaling more of carbon dioxide will lead to the body's inability to expel the gas. This is an interesting diagram I found. I'm not going to go too much into it. This diagram basically shows the difference between carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide. However, the main takeaway of this diagram is that what was called a permissible exposure limit and the recommended exposure limit of CO versus CO2. And for carbon monoxide, the permissible exposure limit is 50 parts per million, whereas the recommended exposure limit for carbon monoxide is 35 parts per million. Carbon dioxide, on the other hand, both the permissible and the recommended exposure limit is 5,000 parts per million. There we go. So basically, since the exposure limit of CO versus CO2, as you can see, is vastly different, this serves as an indicator of the seriousness of CO exposure. Now, the signs and symptoms, of course, is associated with CO poisoning can vary depending on duration of CO exposure. This is an interesting diagram, and it talks about the increasing percent of CO in the blood. And as you can see, the green level is about 10%, and it can go all the way up to plus 50% with a skeleton and crossbones, and usually that's not good. So carbon monoxide can stem from many sources, as this slide indicates. While on the ground, carbon monoxide produced outside the cabin or cockpit can enter the cabin and flight deck via open doors, windows, hatches. Poorly designed and or maintained aircrafts, as well as damaged aircrafts, can result in carbon monoxide poisoning and other gases entering the cabin and the flight deck, either directly or indirectly. This can occur both on the ground and in flight. Now, the NTSB and the FAA are at odds about what action to take with regards to CO detectors in general aviation due to incidences such as what is pictured. So right now, both pictures are showing cracked exhaust mufflers that allowed CO to enter into the cabins of the respective aircrafts, leading to their crashes. The one on the left is from a Mooney M20C. The pilot sustained serious injuries, and the aircraft was considered substantially damaged. And the one on the right is from an Aeronca 7AC, and the pilot was killed. According to the NTSB, the data shows 77% of carbon monoxide accidents were fatal, where fatal killings where basically 42 people were killed. The FAA has declined to require detectors and instead recommends that general aviation airplane owners and operators install them on a voluntary basis. Now, the NTSB disagrees with these actions and feels that the number of CO accidents may be higher than actually what is indicated. Now, here are some examples that I've ran across, and Andre was kind enough to also supply, of carbon monoxide incidences. Now, all of which will be available on Teams for further review, and you can go over it at your leisure. So this is basically an unconscious landing caused by CO poisoning from an undetected crashed muffler. This one was from strong winds pushing exhaust fumes into the plane, but this plane had a CO detector in it. This is a neglected 172 in which both pilot and plane were not current. Neither should have been flying that day. And this one was an interesting one. I actually listened to this one. The pilot lost consciousness while airborne and attributed, and every time he thought of CO, that the CO could have been a factor, he kept brushing it aside, thinking it was something else. And this is actually from a podcast called There I Was by AOPA Air Safety Institute, where you can actually listen to this and other incidences being recapped. So this is just an emergency checklist example of some things you can do to counter or prevent CO poisoning when you suspect that it may be present. Exact procedures, of course, may vary based on aircraft, or specific aircrafts, I should say. Some things like turn the cabin heat off, select maximum rate of fresh air ventilation in the cabin, open windows if the environment, flight profile, operating manual permits, consider using supplemental oxygen if available, and it wouldn't introduce any other safety hazards, of course. Landing as soon as possible or permissible or practicable. Inform air traffic control of your concerns and intentions. Select a leaner fuel mixture if possible. And after landing, seeking medical attention as soon as possible. And of course, before continuing, have your aircraft inspected by a certified mechanic. These are some examples of CO detectors that I found randomly. Some are from Amazon, some are from Aircraft Spruce. Basically, as you can see, they range from about $4 for the least expensive and sometimes the least effective to about $600 based on what you choose to utilize. I have actually seen an example of the least expensive one in an aircraft recently, and it was 12 months expired, and it was never changed. So who knows how effective that really was. And of course, in closing, since hopefully this was not too long, I actually found this little, this cute picture was taken from a 1972 FAA advisory circular. And as you can see, the information is still relevant. Very cute pictures, but it was just basically talking about the symptoms to look for, be aware and be aware, have your exhaust system inspected regularly, and put your mind at rest with a CO test. And,
Very good.
any questions?
Comments, questions? So
Yes.
I have again, as most of you know, I have old Piper, and I have a not cracked but improperly seated exhaust shroud. So CO2 was very top of my concerns, like right away. And I got when I first got the plane, I put the little sticky CO2 detector in there. It discolors slightly, but I do change it. But I recently, the past few months, bought the new Lightspeed Delta Zulu. And as you can see, it actually tells you on every flight exactly what your part per million readings are, which I found to be far more interesting see the actual count,
Yes.
and I can see that, well, it is technically in the safe levels,
Mhm.
but when I fly in my friend's like Cherokee 6, they're like near zero.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, this is something that on my annual I need to definitely have addressed. And thankfully, since I do wear those headsets in my aircraft, if it does rise, I get a vocal, warning that
No, that's
carbon
nice.
monoxide is increasing. So, for a piston aircraft, especially older one, and if you have those concerns, the technology's out there.
Yes.
These headsets cost as much as any Bose headset does, so you're already in the $1,000 range, or as we say, a aircraft maintenance unit. But for the peace of mind knowing that I will get an alert before I pass out my plane.
Mhm.
So,
Yes, true.
but I just love it. But it's great. It's great information. Like I can't download it or anything, but at least per flight, like as you can see, I can go back and look at each flight and see
Yes.
where the count was.
Because you will never know when carbon monoxide hits
Yep.
until it hits.
Yep.
And some of those examples that I was showing, and hopefully you guys will have a chance to actually read them because they were very interesting. The first one was a doctor, and he did not notice the symptoms, and he lost consciousness immediately, crash landed, and thankfully he survived. So it's not something to be taken lightly. It is very, very serious, and the only way for medical personnel to know how high it is for a blood test. And usually the testing for that would be, or the treatment for that is hyperbaric oxygenation, which is usually when you are so high on your CO levels, on the how much you've absorbed or you've exposed to, that your body is not, basically the how the body takes in oxygen is not helping because of carboxyhemoglobin has taken over completely. So yes, it's definitely something to consider, something to think about. Maybe spending extra money to have peace of mind.
And it's not that much for some portable devices. It's within $100 range.
Exactly.
Roy posted a question
Oh, yes.
in Teams. CAP requires CO detectors in the aircraft. Is it true? So I will answer that.
Yes, please
it's
do.
true. And part of flight log, we have date when the carbon monoxide was replaced. We actually have a basic carton-based $5 range type of detector, but as long as it's fresh, it should do the work.
Yes.
It would depend where it's placed.
That's the whole key. You gotta have, on the stickies that are $6, you need to put it where there's a lot of ventilation somewhere,
Right.
and more than one place. The problem with some of these carbon monoxide detectors, if I can interject on some of this, Michelle, is that it depends on what you want to buy. There are some on the market that start at 50. Well, that's already 50% of your. If it starts at 50 parts per million, it's not really going to be any good to you, because by the time that starts reading, it's going to be above that, and now it's going to affect you. And then there's others that start at 10. I've been looking at the 10 size. I find that there's some portables in the 10 range, but most of the ones that are affixed to the dash, which requires a 337 for installation, read at lower levels, and they cost a little bit more. You have some that draw air from different parts through the tubing, and that gives you a better reading also. So you have to be kind of careful of what unit you're going to buy and what you research at. Now, can you get carbon monoxide sitting in a car? Yes, you can. I've had carbon monoxide poison in Mexico City. If you ever go to Mexico City and get in a traffic jam, I guarantee you within an hour you're going to have a headache that feels like your mind's just going to split. And it took my wife and I about almost 3 to 4 hours to get back to normal. So the other thing I'm looking at, even in my aircraft, is a little portable bottle with a little nozzle snuff on it, and it's good for 20 minutes. Putting one of those in your aircraft as a safety measure. They don't deteriorate, and they always have oxygen, and it only costs $20, $30 for that little can, whatever it is.
You're talking about the green bottle with the.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
just a cylinder, it's about, I don't know, 10 inches
Yes.
in length, and it,
We actually have about 3 of those
Yeah.
carried with us.
And I think the other thing is, I carry the blood ox, which
Pulse oximeter,
which will
yes.
tell you, like you know, if like you start feeling funny, and you can run that, and you
Well,
can see that
Is it a
it's fixed.
carbon monoxide detector, or is it a pulse
Pulse
oximeter?
oximeter.
Because the two are different.
Oh, okay.
Because a pulse oximeter will not, it could give you a
Oh.
false read-in,
It won't tell
but
you
a
if you have
CO
carbon monoxide.
detector will tell you if you actually have carbon monoxide.
Interesting.
So a regular pulse ox will just tell you if you're not, if
You're not oxygen.
exactly, if you have, if the air is too thin and you're not getting enough oxygen. We noticed that when we were in Colorado with thin air. A pulse oximeter, especially for, I believe it is women, tend to get symptoms of CO2 decrease a lot faster. But when it comes to CO, pulse oximeter is not recommended. You have to have a CO.
So really,
CO2
just like
up, yes.
so not long ago, I had both my, I have my pulse oximeter around my neck, and then of course my headphones are constantly monitoring. So you kind of really need to do both.
Yes.
Right?
And it's also like you were saying, the oxygen definitely helps because the best thing to do is get out of the situation. But if you're in a cockpit high up in the air, you can't really get out unless you come down. So
most of the effects for low oxygen start at 5,000 for a lot of people. If you're pretty athletic and you've been active, more than likely you can get to 8 or 10. I've been as high as 14 without oxygen bottle. That's when I was pretty young. It's just like you go to the mountain, you go skiing, you see all these kids smoking cigarettes, and they're at 8,000 feet, but the amount of oxygen that they're intaking with a cigarette is equivalent to 15,000. And it's very interesting, the differential that you can actually see with some of these kids that are doing this, and that's a good thing I quit 40 years ago. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff on there. As far as jet aircraft, the only time you're going to find a lot of carbon monoxide input, or even if you're flying at altitude, and it's going to be on the ground, because the exhaust is brought back through your APU system and your air system into the cockpits and into the cabin. You're only using high stage air once you get airborne, and that goes through either a cooler to cool it down, because we're talking in hundreds and hundreds of degrees. So we're getting air that's compressed, but we're not getting the exhaust. The exhaust is in a completely separate section going out the backside. That's why we have fans. We actually have a jet engine developing, pushing a propeller in a jet engine. The thrust, 80% of the thrust is in the shroud with the vanes, and the 20% is the exhaust going out the back end. So you're really pretty good in the airplane, unless you get a oil seal leak, and then you'll end up with a little bit of oil smell inside the cockpit. Even though it goes through what they call scrubbers, they know which one they can shut off that particular system and stop it from the input into the cabin. So that you get these different things. You know, most of the engines that we have in aircraft are gasoline driven, and most of them is caused by cracks. And then seepage through the firewall, because the firewall's not sealed properly.
A question on the stickies, the CO sticky detectors. Does anyone know? Do they just change color when they're detecting? They don't make any audible or anything like that.
Yeah,
So
they'll
turn gray.
They'll start to discolor.
Yeah.
And they'll also, as things clear up, they'll go back to that original orange.
So it's something you basically have to be in your skin. So that's another thing, another one of the hidden dangers of CO.
And so I blatantly plagiarized the CAP AIF for my plane, and suited for my plane. And one of the things I have on there is replace my CO2 detector. But that's mostly for just, because since I bought the headsets, I don't really need to anymore. But that was on my mind, is they only last about 3 months. And
Yeah, but what I mean, but if you're, but another thing is if you're not looking for it, and that's part of the danger, right? With CO, you're going to start feeling off. Your brain's not going to be functioning right, so
Yep.
you might not even think to look.
because your brain doesn't function.
Yeah,
right.
so you don't even
That's
think.
why it's like
You know, is that supposed to be that color? I don't remember anymore. You know.
And like that pilot in the Moonit, he dismissed it based on premise that he was tired naturally.
Exactly.
It was not the first flight of the day, so he's like, oh, I'm exhausted, but it's a short flight for me to get home. So he took off.
It can change color from the time you start an engine and taxi to the approach in for takeoff, change color if you've got a bad leak. And that happened with a Bonanza pilot that I had a number of years ago for training. And
Good job.
they turned around, went back, found out the exhaust was cracked.
Good job, Michelle. And Terry also says thank you. Kudos. Terry Pratt.
Oh,
I'll just get up and start here. See, I'm in the uniform. Well, I have two things. You wanna? Can I install this on here? I'll get Andre to do it. I got two things.
Let's see, I should have an adapter because it's silly design.
Yeah. See if it shows up. So I got two things tonight. Since we're going to have weather here, I think the first one I want to cover as much as possible will be hydroplaning. And we have different types of hydroplaning, and I'm going to discuss what takes place with tires and how it's tested. Everybody been in hydroplaning?
In the
Ever seen it?
car,
We'll cover some issues. I'm going to ask some questions here.
oh, there you go. This one. Sorry, it's very small. What am I looking for? Cup resiliency plan, dispatch.
What I have is the
And then
what's the little newspaper that comes out? What's the CAP news that comes out every month?
Ah, yeah, this one,
Well, that was one of them.
resiliency plan.
Yeah, and that's one I was going to do that a little bit later if I have.
Okay.
Let's get rid of that one and go back. It'll be in the same. way.
Dispatch.
No.
This
Yeah.
one.
There we go. Yeah, we'll just do that. Let's see if we can pull it down a little bit.
Would you like it to be full screen? Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. You can do full screen, sure. And then I'll just scroll down here to where I want to go.
Okay, and I'll share it on Teams. All right.
So, how many people have pulled this up on a monthly basis for the dispatch and read what's in there? There's a lot of good information in there in regards to certain things that have taken place in the past or what you can anticipate to do. So it's almost like a training session in a lot of respects. I like to go through it. There for a while, CAP was not publishing those and putting them into the website. And the present director of safety out of Alabama now is trying to get back into doing this on a monthly basis. Here we go. All I got to do is figure out how to get it back down. I need to scroll down. Yeah, I thought this was a scroll mark right here.
Yep.
Is that it? Oh, there we go. So in this publication, we're going to have tire safety. Everything likes to ride. That's what I'd like to cover tonight. And winter driving. So we'll go through this thing. But this is what they have for the February one. We have Health Month, which is always good for our bodies and stuff. I need to look at that. So here's where we are. And as it says, why does Civil Air Patrol have much more emphasis on tire safety and tire pressures in regards to some of this stuff. There are some formulas that I found in here, and I don't know where I found them, but I happen to do it, where you can figure out a speed of of a vehicle and when its tires will start to hydroplane. On an automobile, hydroplaning starts roughly around 25 miles per hour. In an airplane, because of its design, it starts around 54 miles per hour. And there's a formula with a square root and etc. It also depends upon the pressure within a tire. I like to run my tires a little bit on the high side versus what is recommended. I find that I can get a little bit better mileage out of it, but also if I do get into water, it's going to cut it a little bit quicker. But what happens with hydroplaning is that the tire can only push so much water. Now, Goodyear and Firestone, they'll take and run tires at a speed with water on a piece of heavy glass and cameras and watch what happens to the tread. That's how they get the tread designs. The tread designs are designed to push the water out of the way, but it can only push so much water. Roughly, hydroplaning with water on a highway is roughly the thickness of a nickel. That's when you start to get hydroplaning. I can remember being on the 91. We were headed down to Orange County, and actually it was on the 60. We went to 60 because of traffic. We had a Christmas dinner with the family down in Orange County, and I could feel the hydroplaning in that Honda van that we had, and I decided I'm getting out of this lane. We were up in the HOV lane, and a pickup truck that was behind me decided that he wanted to go a little bit faster, passed me up, and I slowed down to about 65, keeping up with the traffic. And I also like to track in the car in front of me. I figure he's just like breaking water with me. In other words, if I keep my tire in his track, I've got less water than making my own track. And I'm going to have more traction. And actually, when we start to put on our brakes, we begin to push the water, which then goes under the tire, and it begins to hydroplane. I don't think he got about 400 feet in front of me, and next thing you know, he was doing circles in the HOV lane and ended up facing backwards on the HOV lane due to hydroplaning, because you're going along and then all of a sudden you feel that motion throwing you forward. You got tires that are pushing water, and it's like a brake to you, and that's what's taking place. Just move on down here if I can get this down a little bit more. The key to most of this stuff is the tire pressure itself. A vehicle without appropriate tire pressure is more accident prone. Like I say, some of them are underflated. When they get underflated, the tire itself begins to curl. So if I'm underinflated and this is the tire, it begins to do this. If I'm overinflated, it does this. So a lot of cars you can see that are underinflated, they look like they're flat. It's because they're getting curled, and then they begin to wear the tire on the outside of that. When that happens with an underinflated tire, you begin to push water, which makes you more prone to hydroplaning. Now there's a difference between water and there's a difference between snow. And what happens when we're in snow? What happens to the tires when we're in snow? Well, it's not on any of the slides here, by the way. Since we're going to have snow down to 2,000 feet, probably in Yucaipa and maybe in Redlands. I've seen it there before, up to 3 inches. What happens to our tires when we're in snow? Why do we have a tendency to slide in snow?
The snow melts and creates an ice.
Yep, that's right. Underneath that, it's called black ice. And black ice is pretty dangerous. But you can only get so much tire pressure and so much friction to slow you down without putting chains on. The state of California requires chains. If I go to Colorado, I can run regular tires, snow tires on that. And I've had to be pulled out of a ditch because the guy in front of me went off the highway and left me a cloud of white smoke, and all I did was get off the brake and start tapping it and held the steering wheel there. And next thing you know, once I hit that drift, man, it just pulled me over to the side. So the snow is going to compact, and when it starts compacting, it's like an ice cube. So if a grader comes down the highway and starts grading, he can only grade down to where the ice level is. So what you see in regards to this, if this is the highway, this is the layer, this is going to be ice, and here's going to be all the snow up here. So the grader comes down and erases all this stuff, and it won't go down, the blade won't go down to the highway. So next thing you know, you're sitting on that hard shell, which is frozen ice or frozen water. That's what takes place in snow. So if I put on chains, and what chains or cable are doing, they're cutting that, they're making it rough. So, and there's various types I won't cover tonight, which is extensive. So it says here we have told you why we emphasize vehicle pressure, or tire pressure. Next is how do vehicles drive and ensure that the driving vehicle with the correct tire pressure. First, we must ensure that each vehicle has a tire gauge. Well, I carry one on all my cars, and it's just like they want a tire gauge in the airplanes now, so you can check the tire pressure there. Oops, I'm sorry about that, guys, until I get used to this a little bit here. So anyway, they're giving the additional information here in regards to CPR 77-1, the attachment 2, in regards to tire pressure and vehicle maintenance. So winter driving, how it keeps CAP members and resources safe. And this is by Larry Merrick. He was a California director, wing commander, and then he went to National, and he went back to that. He's an engineer out of San Luis Obispo and been very involved with CAP. He has a tendency to stutter a little bit, but he's very dynamic. His wife just passed away here last year. They've been very involved. First of all, if we ever get into hydroplaning, what's the first thing we want to do? Any answers? Take the foot off the gas? Step on the brake? So we want to try and slow down the best we can at the time. You got to be careful about hitting the brakes. Road conditions can be slippery, visibly may not be reduced. It may be reduced, I should say, due to snow, ice, and you may need more time to react to potential hazards. I was driving the canyon, San Mateo Canyon, to Redlands Boulevard to go to work one morning here a year and a half ago. And I missed a car that was making a left-hand turn into one of the ranches there by, I bet, 6 inches. And I'm looking head on into the car in front of me. I could see the sheen in the road, and I already started to slow down. I was doing 55, and I started hitting the brake. And what had happened is that they had PVC along the highway trying to feed some trees that was part of the property, and they sprung a leak, and the water spot was probably a little bit longer than what this room is wide here, and I hit that, and there was nothing I could do except hold on. And she was very slow at making that turn into the driveway, and all I could do was turn the wheel and just listen to those thumping of the brakes, hoping that I was going to miss her, and I swear to God I didn't miss her by more than 6 inches. So kind of scary, even though I'd foreseen this thing, and I was probably almost 100 feet away. So you got to be careful. If you're going up to Big Bear and you're going up Highway 38 in the back side, there's one area that always has black ice. You'll find black ice on Highway 18 driving to Lake Arrowhead crest line, and it's because the way the pressure gradient comes, you'll see icicles sticking out off the limbs towards the highway like this, and that's because of the updraft and the cooling of air. Remember, Bernoulli's principle is temperature, pressure, and volume. And so we always get ice on those areas. The one area is almost like a U-shape, a standard U-shaped turn, but it goes down and it's covered with trees. And so during the day it warms up a little bit, it melts, and at night it gets down below freezing. And we had a lady with 3 kids going up the backside from our church one day and got into that and hit a tree. she slid into a tree. Luckily, nobody was hurt. Did a lot of damage to the car. So we want to make sure the vehicle is prepared for winter driving. Keep the gas tank at least half full. I always try and keep mine full during the winter months. I always carry my chains with me in the back end. I always carry a set of tools for anybody. Check the fluids, check tires, check wipers, mostly the wipers, and always carry a scraper for winter driving. You can always use a credit card. It works pretty good. Done that skiing in New Hampshire. If I said that right, New Hampshire. It was -7. A friend of mine was taking me back to Hartford, Connecticut. We've been skiing with a ski team out of Mount Stowe, I should say. And he had a cardboard on the front of the radiator, and we had developed ice just from our breath inside the car, and we were using credit cards so we could see out the window, scraping it. We did that for over an hour. So just be careful what you look at stuff and what you can carry to make things work. Use the lower gears when pulling uphill. Keep your momentum going if you're trying to do that, and you want to keep your traction going. Prevent your wheels from spinning on a slippery surface, because once they start to spin, you've lost all your traction. You're not going to be able to stop any kind of a slide. Beware of black ice. I just talked about black ice. Thin layers or transparent ice that form on the roadway is difficult to see, especially at night. Use your brakes cautiously. Applying the brakes too hard can cause your wheels to lock up. If you have any skid, they're going to release. So if you can just kind of keep tapping them a little bit, keep tapping them. And if it's really hard, just lay on the brake and see if the anti-skid will take and release, and then put the brake on for you. If you do get into a skid, try to stay calm and steer in the direction of the front of your vehicle wants to go. So if I'm beginning to swerve and move to the left, turn the wheel to the right to try and straighten me out. If you want to make a U-turn, you just keep turning to the left and you'll back in around like this backwards. It's fun driving backwards on a highway. I've done that one too. Keep an emergency kit. How many people keep an emergency kit in their car with water or a couple granola bars just as an emergency? And for the ladies, I always used to say, we're an earthquake country. I guess Turkey and Syria had another earthquake yesterday at 6.8, and their poor people have really been suffering. We've had some strong ones here in Southern California. I always carry something that's going to get me by. Ladies, keep an old pair of shoes in your car, because you can't walk in high heels very long. And a lot of people don't think about that. Just an old pair of tennis shoes, throw them in the back of the car, just keep them there. So I have a bag in my back I always carry with me. I always carry my chains for the winter months. I always carry a couple bottles of water. You never know, you're going to get stuck for a couple days. You can survive on 2 bottles of water. Granola bars go a long way. Just ration yourself. Following tips that you can be more assured of a safe and enjoyable winter driving experience. Driving your privately owned vehicle, POV, and a CAP van can be similar in many ways. But there are always some key differences that you should keep in mind. And here are the few. Size and visibility. The vans always sit up a little higher. You can see that car quite a ways in front of you. I like to try and see the second or the third car in front of me. I see, or even further up. That's why I like to sit high. Even my wife likes to sit high. If you sit down low in a sports car, you won't be able to see much because that view is blocked. And next thing you know, you see the red lights and you're going a little bit faster than the car in front of you, and then you end up slamming on the brakes to the next guy, and it becomes a domino effect. So be sure and look straight ahead. Blind spots from larger vehicles are important. Keep vigilant of your lane changes. There's an individual here yesterday morning that was killed on the I-10. He got on the freeway backwards. Unfortunately, tried to make a U-turn and was T-boned and killed. So if you're going backwards, just get in the center lane up against the wall and stay there with your lights on, and use your cell phone to get the police out there to put a brake in there so you don't do it. So we have no idea, or the Highway Patrol has no idea why he even tried to do that, or if he tried just to swing in front of some ongoing cars. It was late at night. Don't forget, the people on the freeway nowadays like to go 80, 85 miles an hour when the speed limit's really 65. Handling vans are heavier than cars, therefore they don't feel as sluggish in drive. They have a higher center of gravity, though, which makes them susceptible to overturning or spinning. Cargo space. One of the main differences between a car and a van is the amount of cargo space, which carries more weight, passengers, to help you have a little better traction. And then you have fuel efficiency. Overall, driving a van can be more challenging than a car due to its size and handling. They are a little bit top heavy. You have to be careful. So that kind of covers that, but I would like to take and just do this here. If I can do that. Get back to hydroplaning a little bit. I'm just going to ask some questions and then we'll probably just call it quits. We talked about the speeds of hydroplaning. When does a car start to hydroplane at what speed? About 25. And for an aircraft? Yeah, depending upon the weight of the airplane again and what have you. But those are just averages. They're all pre-calculated. So the minimum hydroplaning speed is determined by multiplying the square root of the main tire pressure by 9. So that's the formula. We talk about aircraft hydroplane a little bit. It all depends upon what tire you have and the amount of pressure in the tires. Under what conditions is hydroplaning most likely to occur? Do we have any answers on that one there?
That's an interesting that does kind of work because my mains are 40 psi,
Mm-hmm.
and 9 times the square root is 56 miles an hour.
Yep. Pretty good formula.
Yeah.
I don't have a cold, but I tell you, I had to take care of some cancer in my nose, and it's been dripping ever since. Anyway, it's what happens when you fly at altitude for many years. Under what conditions of hydroplane to occur? We just covered that. Talked about the seed. No sudden stops. Avoid the sudden stops or hard braking. Slowing the vehicle is the best way to decrease or increase the chances. Sudden slowing can increase the chance of hydroplaning, but you want to avoid large areas of water or standing water. So always keep your eye out for that. If you start following a car too close, it's not going to give you enough warning. Covered about how many inches of water. It's about 1/12 of an inch, size of a nickel in thickness. I didn't say whether it was a worn nickel or a new nickel, so you have to just take it for what it's worth. How many inches of water can cause hydroplaning? Oh, we just covered that. This one here says 1/16 of an inch. That's even thinner than 1/12. We talked about 6 inches of water is enough water to cause vehicle traction losses completely, sliding, and hydroplaning. And the worst time on a road for any kind of loss of control and the worst braking is when we've had dry weather on the highway and then we get a little bit of a drizzle. We've got all this oil that drips out of these cars. We've got all this dust up there. And we get just enough to take and make it slimy. And you try to hit the brakes and it doesn't work very often. So just be aware. You got to be more cautious in regards to that. And how can we avoid this? Don't forget that light rains mixes with oil residue on the road surface and creates a slimy condition that can cause vehicles, especially those traveling at speeds in excess of our hydroplane speeds. If you got good insurance, you're in good shape. I think that's about all we're going to cover today. So, but anyway, the magazine's got some good stuff in it. It comes out every month. You can get it online.
with the Civil Air Patrol. And let me just see what else we've got in here that you may be interested
You got
in.
any tips for landing on a freshly contaminated runway? So, precipitation just went through the area, you're landing.
Well, the only thing that's going to control you is not the brake. It's going to be rudder. And make sure you land short so you got a long rollout once you get down to speed.
Aerodynamic braking instead of.
There's been pros and cons on that. Aerodynamic braking. If we do that, the wings want to take and create lift because we have the wings up, but it all creates drag, right? So if we do that, we're going to have more drag. We may slow down a little bit slower, but as far as braking, we're kind of reducing the amount of weight on the wheel. I just like to get my nose wheel down. I'll hold it off as long as I can and get it down, even on a normal runway like in Redlands. Redlands has a 100-foot separation between the west end and the east end, and it's 4,500 feet in length. So you're downhill when you take off going west, and you're uphill at night landing on runway 8. It does it, Pappy.
So like my standard procedure in the Piper, as soon as my mains come down, I keep my nose well up and I raise my flaps to add more.
See, if I was an FAA guy or you worked for the airlines and you did that, you just got yourself a down.
Yeah, well that's why I'm asking that question.
Yeah.
Is that's standard operating procedure, but it sounds, even they do it to.
Is that in the POH, really?
It's actually in the POH, to put more weight on the mains.
Here's the problem when you start opening the door, doing the windows, turning off the lights and stuff. Where's your concentration?
Not on your rollout.
It's not watching where the aircraft's going, and you're still flying the airplane until you pull off the taxiway, or off the runway, I should say. So the FAA, even though you got a co-pilot here, you can call that what have you. They don't want anything to do until I'm completely clear, and I try and follow that procedure with me.
So not touching flaps until.
Not touching anything until you make that turn off the main runway. Your object is now to get off the runway and make it safe for that person behind you. If I'm trying to do this, I'm looking at where I'm going. I can be doing this going down the runway, and I'm trying to find out where the other stuff is. So concentrate on just getting the airplane off the runway and landing, and forget about the flaps and everything else. The flaps are down, and when the nose wheel comes down, you got additional drag anyway. It's all drag. It's all drag. And some of these procedures, hold this off as long as you can. The only reason I hold mine off is because I got to rebalance my I think one of the weights came off. They just use those sticky weights. I think one of them came off. So it kind of rattles a little bit. And it's either that or I'm going to take and put the old tire back on.
But one thing you did mention that, so you instead of normally where we hold our nose wheel up in a contaminated landing, you want to get your nose wheel down faster.
I have better control of the airplane if I get my nose wheel.
And so you've got nose wheel steering and you got a rudder, right? Most airplanes you have nose wheel steering through the arm, through the front, and you got the rudder to help guide you down there. On a airliner, it's a tiller. Got the little tiller over here on the left-hand side. And so you're working on the tiller and aileron. The rudder is there to help you also. But it makes it smoother. And of course, you're talking about 100,000 pounds or better. DC-10 landing was around 135. And if I remember right, in MD-80, we landed around 110.
Was it in Chicago when 737 got out of the runway, I think. Was it 737? They landed on iced runway, on small runway, with a little bit too much of a tailwind. And wasn't enough runway for them to stop, no matter what they.
Some people don't like to use reverse. I can remember a 707 going into Cleveland. Cleveland's got the best angle worms for fishing. The suckers are about this long, I swear to God. And they're big. They're as big as a pencil. And they come out in groves when they get those heavy rains, and then they get on the runway, and it's like slime. And I can remember landing on that thing, and I'm watching the end of the runway, and I'm a first officer, and I'm looking at the runway on a 707, and the captain hasn't put any brakes on yet. And I'm going, what the heck? I reached up and grabbed a handful of reverse, and we stopped probably about 50 feet from the end. He says, oh, thanks, Bob. Appreciate that. he thought we were going to slow down much faster, and it came faster than he had. So I just reached up and pulled up the thing. I said, if I'm going to have to go sit in the hearing, I want to say, I pulled up those reversers. I had those things spooling, boy. You won't see me at that hearing. So there's different techniques. Excuse me. There's different techniques in a lot of things. I think you have to gain your own. I understand what the POH says, but the POH in some cases is a little bit outdated. We noticed that the FAA has come back, and I've been studying for my CFI thing here for the last 2 weeks, and although it hasn't been very successful, I've managed to get quite a bit done. But there's a lot of things that are still in books that are 2010, and on the test questions of what's current and what was there in 2010. There are some factors in regards to certain things that have changed in research and what have you, and it's just like in jet engines, you know. I had a captain, I got out of the seat in Buffalo, New York. He wouldn't put the anti-ice on. We're sitting ready for takeoff. I got out of the seat. I said, you can take off. And I said, you and I are going to be seeing the FAA in a hurry. And I'm a captain. I said, yeah, that's right. But he didn't understand jet engines. He didn't understand. He thought he was going to take and lose thrust by having the anti-ice on. No, you're still going to be pulling more thrust because you're pushing the throttles up to a higher RPM. You're running about 101%, 110% N1. That's how it's done.
But aren't our commercial jets also rated for single engine takeoffs if they have
After B1. Yep. 707's got 4. So, you know, we finally had a conclusion, and I refused to fly with him the rest of the time. And they, after an hour and a half delay, they came up and they begged me to go fly with him. I said, well, I'll get him to Los Angeles, but that's as far as I'm going to go. And I went in and saw the chief pilot, and that was the end of that thing. And I finally ended up flying with him for about 5 years later for 1 or 2 trips. He never said a word about it. So anyway, well, I think that's just about what we have. If we got any more questions, it's a little bit after 8. Hope it's not raining outside. And
Thanks, sir.
it'll be all done. So everybody's on the list for the sign-up sheet. Okay. You want to take and remove this there?
Yeah, I'll take it. You can just pull it off since we are not editing anything.
You got your doodle? I'll have to get me that doodle.
All right.
I'll get one of those little doodads.
Well, I suggest we'll continue this mode of safety meetings. Michelle, maybe we'll start digging into more aeromedical factors affecting safety of a flight. If no other suggestions, I would ask you to explore the effects of hypoxia, because it's really close to CO poisoning. Many symptoms are similar, especially psychological. We brush it off easily, and it's not noticeable until it's too late, maybe. So, thank you everyone, and the meeting is over.